Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? I have a few more minutes. Does anybody have any questions about their group assignment or anything else relating to the class or not relating to the class? All right, we'll give people a few more minutes here before we get started. So anybody want to share their exciting Thanksgiving break with me, with the class? No emergency room calls this weekend? No, that's a good thing.
100 my Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. So I know we almost had a Thanksgiving emergency room call, but luckily we avoided it. All right. A few more minutes here. Kalila, looks like you're at work. So Carlos, you didn't have anything due. That's good. So not too many assignments due over the Thanksgiving holiday. That's a good thing. Applying to grad school. Which school did you apply to?
I'm currently applying to UCLA's what is it called? Higher Student Affairs program.
Okay.
Cal State Long Beach Student Development and Higher Education, and then Cal State Fullerton's program as well.
Oh, nice.
So that's what I spent my whole weekend just typing away.
So if anybody's interested in grad school, it's about 100% guarantee that you'll get into UCR if you apply. And if you want to know who to talk to, I have that information for you. So I usually give a little spiel. I'll do that next week or maybe at the end of this week on graduate school applications if you guys are interested in that at UCR. All right, let's get started, shall we? So today we're going to talk about corporate governance and ethics. Usually I do a Wells Fargo case study, but we've forgone that this quarter, so we're not going to do a case study on Wells Fargo, but they're such a great company because they're so unethical and they've done so many unethical things. They're just a great example to use, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I've been banking with them for 30 years, so you know it's one of those things where damned if you do, damned if you don't. And the reason I don't switch banks is because many creditors, especially in the business aspect, look at how long you've had a banking relationship. So if you've had a bank, the longer your banking relationship is, the better it looks on credit applications for vendors and whatnot, and when you're borrowing money. So it's always good to build a relationship with a bank. Unfortunately, the relationship I have is with an unethical bank. I also have another business account, and that's with Chase, and they're just barely better than Wells Fargo when it comes to ethics. Most banks don't have the best ethical structure because one, their whole thing is making money. No matter how they can make it, they try and make it that way. Um, so just recently I came out with a few of the banks have been laundering money for the drug cartel worldwide. So they got fined $1 million, which is probably just a drop in the bucket of what they actually made. And as you can see, there's really no benefit for a company not to do unethical, business because they'll end up making a lot of money. They'll make 10, 20, 100 times more than what they get fined. So, all right, so let's get started. All right. All right, so we're week 9. We got one more week left, and that's chapter 14. And then we have the finals week. Everybody's ready, right? Woohoo! And then you have Christmas break, or I should say winter break. All right, so chapter 13 is government and ethics. And then the I-eval is out, so you can tell me what is good about this class. Tell me what you didn't like about this class. And you can't say this instructor is a big stupid head. You have to give a reason. He's a big stupid head because blah, blah, blah. All right. So I can take criticism. That's not a big deal, but you got to tell me why you're being critical. You can't just say he's an asshole for being an asshole. I mean, most people do, but that's beside the point. Okay, what you want to see in maybe online classes, since we're going to be doing this probably for the rest of the year, so that'll help your fellow students that are coming in to take this class. Winter, I'm teaching both sections of this class. So the guy who was a jerk to me this quarter, who graduates next quarter, has to take me. And that would be his big mistake for being a big jerk to me. So we'll see how that pans out, right? Okay, what you don't want to see. So just tell me basically what you liked about the class, what you didn't like about the class, what you want to see and what you don't want to see. All right. Final project due date, that is coming up. We'll go over that shortly. All right. So the whole purpose of this chapter is talking about the structure of the corporations. Many of you are going to go work for big corporations. Some of you are going to work for a small corporation. Some of you are going to go start your own corporations, which is good. Most small companies have 5 employees or less. Small businesses, which make up more than 50% of the workforce. So not just large corporations make up the workforce or the government, which is another sector, but actual small businesses that have 5 or more employees make up 50% of all businesses or all employees who work for the companies. Okay. So proprietorship, partnerships, I'm going to tell you the difference between these. And then a corporate governance is basically what your company is stating that they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and what is the firm going to come to is going to accomplish. Okay, partnership 2 up to very quite a few, and there's also limited liability companies, and there's probably, depending on what state you're in, there's a lot of different types of partnerships, limited liability corporations, small corps, so a lot of different other structures. So it all depends on what state you're in and how that state sets up their corporate they're corporations. Okay, so you have Burl and Dodd, who are the two big professors who think how corporations should act. So let me see here. Burl believed that the corporation should be run primarily for the benefit of the shareholders, which are people who own, don't get shareholders and stakeholders confused, because those are two different things. Dodd wrote that the corporation should be run for the benefit of the entire community, and Burl thinks corporations should be ran for the stockholders, okay, the people who own the company. Okay, so what are the pros and cons of both? You guys can tell me all about what you think about what are the pros of being out just to make money for your stockholders as opposed to being part of the community and doing things for the community. Yash, what do you think?
You probably make more money and you keep the people who are actually investing directly in the company happy.
Okay.
Then I guess a con would be that you're not seen in a very good light by the public, so they might not want to buy your product or buy your services.
All right. Nicholas, you had you raised your hand.
Yeah, like for some companies, like it's not good to be unethical, like it's bad PR. So a lot of times, like if they're doing if they're trying to like make money, they'll like invest into like helping the community.
Okay. So Wells Fargo, they've been screwing people for years now. So, but they haven't, I mean, other than getting fined a few $billion, they really hasn't affected them any, right? And everybody knows they're a bad bank. They're an unethical bank. I mean, I didn't shock anybody when I said Wells Fargo is a terrible bank and they're unethical. Everybody kind of just nodded their head and said, yeah, you're right. So how would it affect some of the other companies being unethical? How do you think what would be some of the cons of some of these companies acting unethically? Can somebody give me an example?
I think such as like Volkswagen, before they produce like the cars with like high carbon dioxide, and they just lose their customers because they don't want to. The people just don't want to buy the cars.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's when they're being like ethical, and customers just like, oh, we're probably gonna switch to another company if they have the choice.
That's a good example. Yeah, when Volkswagen, all the news came out about Volkswagen, it did hurt their sales a little bit. Of course, so I had a friend that said, I'm going to go buy a Volkswagen. It's 0% down, and they're practically giving these things away, which they did for about 3 or 4 months. They were really, really cheap. And then, you know, everybody fined them. All the different countries fined them, so they finally end up, you know, doing the right thing. But there was a couple other car companies that did the same thing too, and they didn't get nearly as much attention or fines and stuff. So exactly. So that's a good example. A lot of these corporations actually start out as being part of the community. There, for example, when I went to UCR for the graduate school, there's a guy there who made T-shirts and sold T-shirts and started his company for the sole purpose of benefiting the what was it, the nuclear meltdown that they had in Japan for all those people. So all the proceeds that he made went directly to Japan. I forget what it was. It was a few years ago. And there's other companies that go out there that specifically start their company to help the community. So, you know, they said, hey, we're going to give, you know, 50% of all the profits we make to the community, and that's how they started. There's a shoe company, Allbird Shoe Company. My son wanted a pair of shoes for Christmas from there, so I went on the website and I bought him a pair of shoes. And that's their whole thing, is they're here to help the community and do, you know, all of half of their profits go to different charities and to one particular one that they sponsor. So a lot of companies are like that and do that, which is not a bad thing. Okay. So which brings us to another question is, are corporations good or evil? For the most part, what do you think? Juan, what do you think?
I think they're essential for the economy, but they make a lot of dumb decisions sometimes.
They do. You know, a lot of decisions are done by people. So so the question shouldn't really be, are corporations good or evil? The question should be, are the people running these corporations good or evil?
Yeah, like, well, I know where you're coming from, and I think a lot of companies should have like a better like way of choosing their managers and kind of how they're running the company. Like for example, like it's kind of crazy that like Amazon made so much money during a pandemic while people are like suffering. You know, some people might be that in a negative way, but essentially like they are also helping the economy by giving people what they need during this time of crisis. So I believe, like I said, it's just more picking better managers, running a little bit better.
Yeah, and that's and I'll get into that a little bit later in this discussion, but that is one of the biggest problems that corporations have is sometimes the management has a different perspective and a different motivation for making money than the stockholders do. I have a good friend who actually is working for Amazon right now as a consultant, and he usually is a guest speaker for this class, but he was unable to do that this quarter. But he was always saying how it's his fiduciary duty to do for the stockholder at being an independent contractor or a consultant. He's there, they'll hire him for the company, but his duty is to the stockholders or to the shareholders. And, he does what's in their best benefit. Okay. So the shareholder primacy, the belief that a corporation should be run primarily or exclusively for its shareholders. And that's Burrell's philosophy. So the shareholders are the legal owners, the stockholders. Financial capital, is a critical resource of the company, and a single objective to maximize profits and to pay back those shareholders is what Burrell believes. And that's what many corporations think, that, and that's how the stockholders want them to think is, hey, we're here, we gave you our money, we want you to use it in the best possible way to give it back to us. So we invested in you, we want to make a profit off of this. And so a lot of companies like Wells Fargo Bank or some of these other companies lose sight of, the community, they lose sight of their employees, and all they do is what's maximize profit for the shareholders. Okay, so a corporation is like a legal person. It's like a legal entity owned very real and legal sense by their shareholders. Corporations can own property, assets, equipment, cars, boats, RVs, houses, and more. I used to live in Newport Beach, which is a little beach area here in Southern California. And many of the boats in the bay there were executive office, were a branch suite of the executive office. So they would go out on the weekends, do their little corporate retreats, and it was a total write-off for the companies because they own these. Many times people own private jets. I don't know if you follow The Rock or not, but he's always doing something on his private jet and going around the world everywhere. So corporations can own assets, they can own property. Many of them own their own buildings. Many of them invest in real estate and own other buildings. So there's no limit. It can be just like a real person, and it is a legal entity like a real person. Any questions about that so far? I know that can be a little confusing sometimes. Okay, so property rights owners claim the residual earnings of the corporation or the profits after all other stakeholders have been paid. So that would be the stockholders get the residual. They monitor the management team, make sure that the team works in its best interest. They have what they call a nexus of contracts, a model of the corporation suggesting that the firm is a sum total of its contracts, because each firm has several different contracts, and it can have many different contracts with many different stakeholders, vendors, independent contractors, employees. So there's many different types of contracts that a corporation will have. Okay. So the stakeholder model is the belief that a corporation should be run for the benefit of its entire stakeholder set, with no group enjoying primacy and decision making. So as a stakeholder model, that would be the whole company and everybody that it affects, all the stakeholders involved, which we'll go over shortly. Dodd believed that this because the community grants the corporation the right to exist. The manager should run the corporation for the benefit of the community as a whole, not just for the stockholders, but for all the stakeholders also. Okay, so this kind of gives you a breakdown of what a stakeholder is. So external stakeholders would be suppliers, vendors, society in general, government agencies, creditors, the people the company borrows money from, shareholders, the people that it receives money from by selling stocks, and customers. So those are external stakeholders. And the internal stakeholders, the employees, managers, and owners. So sometimes you can be both internal and external stakeholder, like the owners can be. Owners can be shareholders or stakeholders in both. Okay. So the corporation cannot exist without a charter from the state, and therefore the corporation's first duty was to provide for the good of the community. So each state is a different charter. Just so you know, for future reference, Nevada, Florida, Maryland, and about 5 other states do not have laws protecting the people, or protecting people from corporations. There's no corporate veil. That is no corporate veil. The people who own the in those states, the people who own stock or own the corporation are not responsible for what the corporation does. Okay, so if you have an unethical company and you decide to screw a lot of people, I would suggest that you incorporate in Nevada, Florida, and Maryland. So that way you're not responsible for your actions. And so there's a lot of criticism about that, about those states, but unfortunately that's the way they set up their state charters. California is completely different. So I know many of you disagree with this, and I agree totally that it shouldn't be this way, but some people in corporations agree, you know, hey, we formed a corporation. Corporation's job is to make money for its stockholders. I'm being the 100% stockholder, you know, I'm out to make as much money as I can. Okay, and then the international community is a little bit different, and we'll talk about that in the next chapter. Okay. And then we had a question on the chat. What was the chat question? It doesn't pull up when I'm in full screen. So if you need to make a remark, go ahead and make a remark or raise your hand. Okay, so a normative stakeholder view that the corporation has legal and moral obligations to work for the benefit of all its stakeholders. Customers have a right to products that do not harm. Employees have a right for fair wages and safe working conditions. So this is kind of a normal stakeholder view of what states do for corporations that they have in the charters. So corporations are self-governing, which means that a state doesn't have a right to go, hey, you have to pay your employees this amount of money or this, but you have to pay. Certain states have minimum wage laws, so you'll have to do that. So they are governed by some agencies. The Pollution Act, you can't go and pollute rivers and all this other stuff. So there are some things that are regulated by government agencies, but in general, most corporations are self-governing, and governments do not go in and say, hey, we need to see your books, what you're doing, show us everything you got. They can't do that without a good cause. So that's why you find out 5-10 years down the line that, you know, some company's been polluting a river, a lake, or whatever. So finally they get enough evidence against this company and they get a government agency to go after them or a law firm. Okay, government boards and incentives, agency problem, a consequence of the separation of ownership, which is the shareholders, the principals, and control, management, or the agents in the corporation. Agent problems occur when the goals or principles differ from those of the agents. So this is where we get into a lot of unethical things where the shareholders say, hey, you got to make as much money as possible. And the agents or the managers say, okay, that's a free ticket to do whatever we want to make as much money as we want. And then what happens on top of that is you give these people bonuses for the managers and the agents. You give them bonuses for reaching certain goals or certain dollar amounts, and so they get a lot of unethical ideas of how they're going to do that and achieve those goals. Okay. So the principals are the owners or the resources, pieces of property in a corporation. Shareholders are considered the principals. Agents are the individual or groups hired to administer the property or resources of the principals. So they are the managers of the company, the corporation, and they're considered to be agents of the shareholders. And the agents do have a fiduciary duty to do what's in the best interest of the shareholders. Okay, a tender offer is an offer by those hoping to control the corporation to purchase shares of dissatisfied investors. And a proxy fight, an attempt to be by dissatisfied investors or take stockholders to gain seats on the board of directors. Okay, so those are two terms you might hear a little bit about in the papers, what's going on in the news reports. Okay, so the agency problem is modern corporations are owned by principals and managed by agents. So like a lot of older corporations before, the principals and the agents were the same people. So you'll see like for my company, I was president and CEO, which meant I was on the board of directors and I also managed my own company. So I didn't have to answer to anybody. I could do pretty much whatever I wanted to do. So I didn't have a board of directors to answer to. Basically, all I had to do was not break the law and do what was ethical, and everything would be fine. But a lot of times nowadays, they have, like with Wells Fargo and some of the other large corporations, you have the principals who are the stockholders, when many times they only own one share of stock and really don't have too much to say about what's going on. And they are the people managing the agents. So they'll have 90% of the stockholders not having really any say of what's going on. You have 10% held by very few people on the board of directors, and they pretty much run the company. So when I ask you if a corporation's evil or good, those 5 people or half a dozen people running, or a dozen people running that corporation from the stockholder perspective, are those people good or evil? And that's basically what it comes down to when you're talking about a company, how it's managed, the decisions that it makes. Okay. Questions so far? No? Okay, so the board of directors, a group of individuals who monitor the executive team of the corporation and ensure that those executives are acting in the best interest of the shareholders. So like I said, Wells Fargo has thousands and thousands of stockholders and shareholders, but only a handful of them actually run the board, and only a handful of them actually make decisions for the whole corporation of what the executives should do or shouldn't do, and act in the best interest of the shareholders. So the fiduciary duty is the legal obligation of the agents or the managers to act in the best interest of the principals or the owners. Fiduciary duties include the duty of loyalty to work for the optimal good of the owner, and the duty care to not take undue risks that would jeopardize the principal. And fiduciary duty, those people are legally bound to do what is good for for the owners. So it works from everything from a huge corporation like Wells Fargo down to very small corporations. So if I had a legal agent working for me, even though I'm the only owner, if that person doesn't do what's in my best interest, for example, should he not kick out somebody who's been renting my apartment or whatever for 6 months, they've never made a payment or anything, I understand what's going on with the COVID and everything, but it would be in his best interest to act, or it would be his interest to act in my best interest of what is best for me. Okay. So inside directors, executive or managers working inside the company who also hold seats on the board. So for example, I'm the president and CEO. Many medium and small size companies work that way. And even many large companies work that way. You know, IKEA is one of them. You know, the people who own the company also run the company. Ford has been that way for many, many years. So, and then even private companies, ones that don't sell stock, are very much that way, no matter if they're small or large. Okay, outside directors, members of the board of directors not employed by the corporation in any other role. And many times, the board of directors will be selected, a lot of business professionals, experts, even professors with PhDs in either business or politics or whatever type of business that they're in. If somebody's an expert in that type of field, they'll put them on the board of directors to help guide them and direct them. And the board of directors usually meets once a year, sometimes once a quarter, and they also get paid for their duties. Okay. So the purpose of the corporation is to bring the shareholders and the community together and to be managed by the managers of the company. This is kind of a visual of that, and this is in your book. Okay. So here's where we start getting into some problems when you get pay for performance and business bonuses from the business entities. So pay for performance is a variable or contingent compensation that focuses managers on key variables designed to align their interests with the management teams. So for example, when Wells Fargo says, hey, we're going to give you bonuses for every new account that you get, and suddenly the managers start doing all these bogus accounts that are not real accounts to make their bonus quotas, that's when you or pay for performance quotas, that's when you start getting into some ethical issues and legal issues. So additional compensation paid to executive managers, employees when they meet the certain performance objectives. This is what can create unethical behavior, and if not checked, can really kill a company. Okay. So stock-based compensation, like I said, a friend of mine who does he does international taxes, and only about a handful of people in the whole country can actually do what he does. And Amazon offered, no, it was Google. He worked for Google for a while, and they offered him a full-time job. And he said, well, how much do I get in stock? And they said, oh, we don't give you stock. And he said, well, that would be the only reason to work for your corporation, because you're just like any other company from my perspective. And the only benefit would be to get stock-based compensation for that, you know, because their shares keep growing and growing and growing. And so they refused. And so he moved on and he's working for Amazon now. So that's kind of a stock-based compensation, which some companies do, some companies don't. Stock option is the right to buy a certain number of corporation shares at a specific future date for a specific price. Many times, if you go on as an executive manager for some of these companies, they'll give you a stock option to buy stocks after a few months that you're employed there, and they'll give it to you at a discount. So it might be selling for $100 market share, they'll let you buy it for $50. Okay. And the stock grant is a gift or grant of stock given to organization members, primarily executives. So if you're a COO or a CFO or in the chief suite, you might get we'll say, hey, we'll give you 100 shares of our stock as part of your bonus, or or signing on with us, whatnot. All right, so let's wake you guys up. Let's do a poll. So how did Wells Fargo make an extra $2 billion? In 2019, they made $2 billion. New products to customers, account fees. What, you don't think Wells Fargo is innovative and does new products for customers? They're always calling me and bugging me. No, you say, hey, you don't have a Wells Fargo credit card, platinum card. worth $15,000 limit. Don't you want one of those? And I'd say no. What am I going to do with that? They don't even give you bonus points. That's how bad Wells Fargo is. They take them away after a year if you don't use them. All right. So did we get everybody? 65, 66. Come on, we got 20 more people. Let's go. Come on, wake up. Wake up. Let's go. At least one more person. All right. This shows me how often you guys look at your screen. So there's still a number of you that are not even looking at your screens. All right. Ready for the poll? I want to end the poll. All right. So new account fees. So 49% of you think that. Overdraft fees, 36%. New customers, 21%. And new products for customers. So what do you think? So the winner is new account fees. So fees on new accounts. Everybody saw that, right? And the answer is, you guys ready? Drum roll. So Wells Fargo did this in overdraft fees, and how they did it is they engineered a way to generate the automatic payment of the highest payment first. So on a particular day, say you had automatic fee transfers of $100, $50, $25, and a check for maybe you paid your rent for $1,000. Okay, well, they would take that rent check for $1,000 first, and then say you only had $1,001 in your account. So instead of paying 4 of those and bouncing your rent check or giving you 1 overdraft fee and paying your rent check, they decided to take your rent check first, even though you did it last, and do that first, and then charge you 4 times 4 late fees or overdraft fees. So that's how they got away with doing that. Of course, they didn't tell the consumer this. All they did is say, hey, we're just going to charge you late fee because you bounced. We paid 4 of your electronic debits and you didn't have enough money in your account. So you guys agree with that? Disagree with that? Maribel's going, this is crazy. Why did they do that?
I'm glad I'm not with Wells Fargo. So
I know. Well, you know, Chase does the same thing too, and so do many other banks. So
I think I read somewhere primarily a lot of their income does come from overdraft fees. Like a lot of
a year.
Like that's crazy.
And that's just one bank, 1 year.
Like stuff like that is just gonna make people like go towards like other decentralized forms of currency. So
in the good note, if you're a company, you can actually use that as a bank expense, so you can write that off on your taxes at the end of the year. So it's not all bad, but so Wells Fargo, is it on this slide? So they got $3 billion in fines, and then over the same period, they made $5 billion. So they make $5 billion unethically. They get a fine of $3 billion. They still come out $2 billion ahead.
Professor, I have a question. Do you think they purposely, or they're like, hey, you know, we're for sure going to do this. We know that the fine is this much, but we might generate this much. Because of that reason, let's just go ahead and continue to do fraud. I just feel like I'm pretty sure I know they've done fraud for so many years and all they do is get fined, but I'm pretty sure they allocate a certain amount of money that goes towards like, hey, we're paying our fees due to fraud. So let's just continue to do this.
Well, as my friend would say, it's in the gray area. So it's not black, it's not white, it's not definitely. I'm sure in that banking, all the banking stuff that you sign off and say, yes, the bank terms, yes, I read everything. Nobody reads everything. So I'm sure something is in there about that. And I'm sure you approved it. Otherwise, there would have been class action lawsuits, which there are not. So one way or another, it's a paper for performance. And they get bonuses tied to that. So if you're a stockholder and you say, okay, my company and your whole philosophy is all I care about is making money from my Wells Fargo stock, right? So if I get my dividend at the end of the year, I'm good. If my stock goes up in price, I'm good. That's all I care about. So if you get fined $3 billion, but you make $5 billion, as a stockholder, are you going to care? I mean, if you have no ethics and you're just in it for the money, you're not going to care. You're going to go, yeah, I don't care what the bank does. Unless it gives you really bad publicity like Volkswagen for all of 3 or 4 months, and then your sales went back to normal. I don't know if they did it back in 3 or 4 months, but Volkswagen's did a lot of incentives, and their sales are probably at normal a year later of what they were the year before. So are you going to get promoted or are you going to get fired? Are you going to make money for your company? Or are you going to get fired because you didn't make you didn't do your quota, you didn't get enough overdraft fees this quarter. So those are all the things you have to consider, and those are all the things that you have to consider when you work for a company like Wells Fargo. Which brings me to another point. Go to Hell Fund. I know if you guys know what that is, but a Go to Hell Fund is when you save up money from your current job to tell your current employer to go to hell because you don't agree with their ethics or you don't agree with the way they're doing business, and you tell them to go to hell and you quit. So, which is always a good thing that I recommend for everybody. I've done it twice. I told the company to go to hell and I don't like the way you do business. I'm not going to work with you. There's only 2 companies I ever refused to do business with when I owned my own company. And both those were law firms. They're the horrible people. But so, if you put yourself in the right position, you can tell the people to go to hell. That, if they violate your ethical standards, you don't have to work for them. You don't have to worry about getting fired. But also do a little bit of research first before you do that, before you go work for a company. If you have a very high moral compass, you're obviously not going to go work for Wells Fargo, right? So if you want to make a lot of money, then Wells Fargo might be a choice for you. All right. So the Federal Reserve punishes Wells Fargo in an unprecedented move. The Fed says the bank won't be allowed to grow its assets until the bank cleans up its act. So even growing its assets was they didn't even specify how they were going to do that or do anything like that. They just told them that. So anyway, the bank fires 5,300 people, which they were downsizing anyway. And then between 2011, 2016, from fraudulent sales, they said they got rid of that many people, but in actuality, they downsized, and there's almost a lot. There's always a lot you can do to do that. For example, during this pandemic that we're having right now, a lot of companies are using it as an excuse to downsize up to 25%. Okay, so the purpose of the corporation was to make fake accounts, but with real fees attached. Wells Fargo foreclosure hustle. They foreclosed on a lot of houses. The overdraft scam. These are just the things that they've done over the last few years. Okay, 800,000 fake auto insurance policies. And what they do is they give you a loan for a car, and they say you have to have insurance on that car. So they include it in your payment, don't tell you about it, and they get a bonus or a fee for the 800,000 fake auto insurance policies that they do on top of the insurance that you already have. So 25,000 car repossessions that were not actual repossessions that they should have done. Illegally seizing service members' cars, people who are in the service, who are out to sea. Sometimes they go out to sea for 6 months or longer. So what they did is they illegally seized their cars. preying on the elderly and underage Native Americans. What they do is they give the underage Native Americans bank accounts and charge them fees for that. Overcharging business owners on credit card fees. Yes, I got a bonus back on that for them overcharging me on my credit card for many things that they did. So I think I got a gift card to Barnes and Noble. Okay. So ethics, values that define for an individual group or society things that are morally right or wrong. That which promotes human freedom of expression and development. These are in your book. Okay, and culture. So this is actually a culture of Wells Fargo is the way they behave in their ethics, a pattern of behavioral assumption that are considered appropriate and correct for organizational members. You know, like I said, a lot of times the culture of a company tells you all about how they run their business. Okay, the mission statement, we've gone over that many, many, many times. In Wells Fargo's mission statement, then holding themselves accountable, they got the old CEO versus the new CEO. The old one was there for 3 years. He did all that crap that I just showed you. And so finally he got fined. He made, I think he got like $100,000 golden parachute or $100 million golden parachute. And I think they fined him something like $17.5 million out of $100 million for acting unethically. So the guy walks away with a $82.5 million as compensation for running an unethical company. Luckily, he didn't have to do any time. But even then, you know, these guys that actually do a year or 6 months or even a few years end up walking away with hundreds of millions of dollars. So sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not worth it, right? Depending on what your moral compass points. Okay, so the new CEO is supposed to do everything new. We'll see how that works. Okay, he's been there about a year. All right, so final exam is going to be Wednesday, the 16th at 8 a.m. It's going to be just like the midterm. I'm going to throw out a question out there. I'm not going to give it to you ahead of time this time, but you know how I like it. I like it bold lettering, headings, subheadings, and then tell me all the good things that you know about that. And like always, you can use whatever resources you have because I have no way of controlling that. So do what you want. I just make it a lot harder to do the questions a lot harder. That's all. Okay. So anything about the final project? You have up until Friday, December 18th at 11:59 p.m. So turn those in on iLearn. I will put a thing up there shortly for the final project. Questions, concerns?
Do we use the template for the final project too? The homework template or the mini quiz paper template?
You can. I told you how to format it, so that format doesn't have everything in it. But there's going to be like that format. But you're going to have the title page, cover page, references, all that other good stuff. So you're going to add all those in proper format.
Okay.
Carlos, that's exactly it. What's the worst that can happen? They're going to fine you a few $1 million and you're going to make billions. So yeah, that's the whole attitude of many of these large corporations. Arthur Andersen was the same way. So
I don't know. You'd think the federal government would learn by now, right?
Federal government doesn't care. They're getting a lot of money from these corporations. A lot of these corporations are paying for their advertisements for when they run for re-election. So that's one of the problems. We were talking about all the crap that the United States lets you eat that they don't make illegal, like a lot of the GMOs, like all these other companies do. So we have a high diabetes, obesity, all these other problems because the federal government and your local representatives don't get on these large corporations about all the crap that they're putting in our food. And so what happens is they donate a lot of money to their campaigns. They donate a lot of money to their causes, so they can pretty much make sure that the government doesn't put regulations on the food. So the red food dye, which is made out of usually it's made out of bugs, little rodents, and for the red dye that they put in all the food, most countries outlawed that. The United States hasn't. Most countries outlaw all of the ingredients that they have in foods that you can't pronounce, but the United States doesn't do that. So just one other ethical issue that you can talk about. And the incentives and forces corporation to do unethical things. Yeah, a lot of that is set up by the board of directors. All of these incentives are, go from the top down. They say it flows from the top down. Well, that's how a lot of that works. So very good point. Other questions?